Blue Beetle came out at possibly the worst time for a superhero movie, as it's the live-action DCEU film that is at the tail end of a massively hated, dead franchise that's also being rebooted. Furthermore, it released in the shadow of Across the Spider-Verse, Oppenheimer, and Barbie, all of which were incredibly popular and anticipated films that will trump any potential hype for Blue Beetle. The final nail in this movie's coffin, and definitely the most lethal one, is the collective superhero fatigue that people have felt for the past few years. With all of these factors combined, I still decided to watch Blue Beetle out of curiosity and was pleasantly surprised. Thus, I am here to argue that Blue Beetle is an underrated gem that deserves more praise and love, despite the few flaws it has. I'll try to be as spoiler-free as possible in the beginning, but I'll transition into talking about the spoilers later on in order to give my full analysis of the movie, so do be warned. For starters, I will praise the soundtrack, as it's actually very well made and fitting for the story. The mix of electro, orchestral, and Latin music creates an interesting dynamic that blends multiple aspects of the characters and story together. For example, Jaime's theme has both electro and orchestral parts that juxtapose each other, yet they begin to blend as the theme progresses. This transformation of the music parallels Jaime's transformation into Blue Beetle as he and the Scarab fuse into one symbiotic biomechanical being. Not only that, but the mix of orchestral music that one expects from an intense American superhero film with Latin American music represents the dual identity of Jaime, that being a Mexican-American superhero. Overall, I think Bobby Krilic did a great job with the soundtrack and I applaud him for it. Moving on from the music, the cinematography and visuals in the movie are actually fantastic. Pavel Pogorzelski, forgive me if I mispronounce the name, is the lead cinematographer for the film. It is clear that he's very skilled in his craft, as there are some shots in the movie that blew me away and almost reminded me of some great movies like Blade Runner. An interesting fact about him is that he's worked with Ari Aster, a horror and short film director, who's most well known for projects like Midsommar, Hereditary, and The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. Look it up if you're curious. Besides those, he's still relatively new to the industry, so it's great to see how his direction made Blue Beetle look visually stunning. I also appreciated how the CGI was decent and didn't override my enjoyment of the film, nor did it trump any practical effects, which plenty of were used. The suit looked organic, and I appreciate that it's a genuine suit rather than some CGI garbage that flashes on like a PowerPoint presentation. Quantumania. It's clear that the artistic side of this movie was very passionate and that they took their time, otherwise it would have been just another corporate cash grab that falls into the abyss of superhero sludge. Luckily, Blue Beetle isn't, and it's actually something quite special in my eyes, especially in our modern climate. While I won't summarize the plot of the story, I will go over what I liked and disliked about the plot. The overall plot is fairly straightforward, as it follows Jaime Reyes accidentally coming into contact with the Scarab, an alien biotechnology device that gives him his Blue Beetle activities. He then uses the Scarab to fight against Cord Industries, a corporation led by Victoria Cord who wants to take the Scarab and make an army of superpowered mercenaries. I think the plot works, as it's very reminiscent of other superhero movies like the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Both Peter and Jaime are young, naive students, both have a deep connection with their families, both accidentally acquire their powers and have to assume the responsibility of heroism, both fight evil corporations, etc., etc. However, I will not argue that Blue Beetle has ripped off or copied Spider-Man, as that would be ignorant. Jaime is his own distinct character who, while not the most complex, is compelling, charismatic, and enjoyable to watch. His dynamic with his family is also fun to watch, as their distinct personalities mixed with their Mexican heritage and culture are both very familiar to me and entertaining. Speaking of Mexican heritage, I think the Hispanic and Latino representation was very well done. As a Hispanic American myself, it was endearing and funny to watch some aspects of my family's culture be represented in a mainstream film, without being overly stereotypical or racist. The director, Angel Manuel Soto, forgive my accent for I can't speak Spanish, and plenty of the producers and writers are Hispanic, thus their knowledge and first-hand experiences as Hispanic Americans were very valuable. Without getting into spoilers yet, I will say that the use of foreshadowing, while basic and not spectacular, shows that the writers and the direction was very competent. Most events in the story are foreshadowed and hinted at if you pay attention, so I'd say it's acceptable. What I disliked about the plot were mainly the villains, more specifically how they handled the main villain, Carapax. I thought it was fairly cheap how he was meant to be a parallel to Jaime, yet his backstory is revealed at the last second in a montage of flashbacks. My correction would be to start off the film with Carapax's backstory and then tie that back into the present day as an assassin for Victoria Cord, the overarching antagonist. Beyond that, I think both Carapax and Victoria were decent villains, especially for a hero origin story. Now, before I get cancelled or whatnot, I'm going to say that Blue Beetle is a very political movie, and it's more political than most superhero movies. Yes, the movie is quote-unquote woke, as it addresses social issues that marginalized groups have faced, as well as critique and villainize the source of those issues. Hell, the main antagonist of the movie is an evil CEO who wants to capitalize off of super-powered private mercenaries that would make colonization and invasions of other countries far more effective. Furthermore, the financial struggles that the Reyes family faces, from Jaime's college debt and his inability to find a job, to medical debt, being unable to pay mortgage, etc., are all very familiar struggles for millions of people in the United States and even abroad, especially for immigrant families and Hispanic Americans. In addition, the gentrification of land that used to be primarily Mexican American neighborhoods was bought by big businesses and rich people in order to turn Palmera City into a metropolis. Ultimately, this displaced what I can only assume to be thousands of Mexican Americans, including the Reyes family, to live in ghettos and barrios. Overall, I think the politics of the movie addresses many real issues that millions of people, especially Hispanic Americans, can relate to. The more that these issues are addressed and the more awareness is brought to them, especially in mainstream media, the more likely that genuine progressive change can help these people live for a better future. Now, I will get into spoilers in order to continue talking about the story, but skip ahead to the time indicated to avoid them. To tie this into the politics, the parallels between Cord Industries mercenaries and ICE officers was pretty blatant. Not only do the uniforms look nearly identical, but the way that the mercenaries raided, assaulted, and abused the Reyes family mirrors the inhumane and abusive behavior of ICE towards immigrants at the US-Mexico border. From allegations of forced abortions and genocide, to separating families and locking them in cages, to the perpetual police brutality that racial minorities face, these are all very real issues represented by the film in a dramatic yet emotionally evoking manner. Straying away from the politics, I think Jenny and Jaime's relationship was actually decent. It has its fair share of ups and downs, struggles, etc., and I think the two of them get along decently. Not only that, but I do appreciate Jenny as a character, as she isn't some damsel in distress. She takes action when necessary and sticks up for her values, as she's the one who confronted her aunt about the scarab initially, and she's the one who went ahead and stole it from Cord Industries. What she planned on doing with the scarab, I honestly forgot, but at least she's a more compelling love interest and character than plenty of the copy and paste damsels in distress who have no agency or purpose other than being saved by the hero. Furthermore, while it is a trope at this point to kill off a parent or mentor figure for superheroes, I think it worked well in this case. Roberto, or Jaime's dad, was a good character whose arc of finding purpose in a chaotic, absurd world was fascinating to watch. Now, I am no philosopher, but I think Roberto shows some qualities of stoicism and existentialism. First, with stoicism, he doesn't allow for external factors outside of his control to affect his mood or bring him down. Rather, the challenges and hardships motivate him to do better, to try harder, and to encourage his family to keep trying and moving forward, whilst also controlling themselves and their emotions. Roberto remains positive and calm through most situations and is usually the one who mediates conflicts and intense emotions amongst his own family. It's great to see such a positive, affectionate male role model for a young man, as that is always beneficial to see in movies, and preferable than the Sigma alpha male crap. Second, with existentialism, Roberto was constantly seeking purpose in his life and thought of his own life as a perpetual search for meaning. Side note, as someone who's been reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, I think Frankl's ideas are very relevant and tie in with existentialism and Roberto's character. Frankl quotes Nietzsche by saying, "He who has a why can bear almost any how," indicating that purpose and meaning are what fuel our lives. If we can find a reason to live, a reason for our suffering, and for us to endure our own suffering, then we become more tenacious and capable of enduring hardships. Roberto exhibits this perfectly, as his constant search for meaning in his own life keeps him going forward and staying positive. Similarly to how Frankl imagined his wife and family while imprisoned in numerous concentration camps, Roberto relies on his family and the thought of a better future with them to go forward, regardless of what happens. He brushes off having a heart attack, a traumatic near-death experience that financially ruins the family, because he can find comfort and happiness in their familial bonds, as opposed to material possessions. As a result, so long as he stays connected with them, he can find confidence in himself to seek his own purpose and to find the bright side towards his own suffering and hardships. Finally, his arc concludes with Jaime's dream/vision, where Roberto declares that his life led up to that very moment, the exact moment when Jaime was nearing death at the hands of Victoria. Roberto instills hope in Jaime to keep fighting and pushing forward in life, even when it seems so easy to give up. It's cliché, I know, but hope and tenacity have proven to be correlating factors between people who survive and people who don't in difficult situations. As previously mentioned with Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl noted that those that held on to hope with every last ounce of their life were more likely to survive in the concentration camps as opposed to those who gave up hope. Granted, who was chosen to live and who was chosen to be killed in the gas chambers was entirely out of the prisoners' control, but Frankl mainly referred to the prisoners who were not chosen to be gassed, those who lived through the horrid, traumatic, and inhumane conditions that the concentration camp trapped them in. Those without hope were more likely to die of exhaustion, exposure, and disease, etc. Meanwhile, those with hope were more likely to recover from their ailments and continue living until the camps were liberated. Overall, I think Blue Beetle is a good superhero origin film that touches on a wide array of philosophical and political ideas while presenting them in a digestible and enjoyable manner. The characters are compelling, the themes and ideas are more relevant today than ever before, and it's just a fun movie to sit back and watch with family and friends. It's a shame that this movie is pretty much a flop as it barely broke even on the official budget. However, most movies need to at least double or triple their official budgets to truly break even, as there are numerous miscellaneous expenses that aren't explicitly labeled, such as advertising. Unfortunately, I doubt the movie will make a significant amount of money as it's already been out for a few weeks and has been shown to be unpopular, especially in the modern cinema and superhero climate. Thanks for watching and see you later.